All right, welcome into Before Floor, an extension of 5 on the Floor here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you're hitting that like button and also subscribe so you can get all of the latest content. We have a lot of Heat content during the day. It's not just the streaming shows. We post 5 on the Floor there. You can get Brady's breakdowns there. You can get Feel the Heat there early in the week. Lots of good stuff on the Miami Heat. And also the videos, the Zoom videos of the players. We put those up as well, and of Coach Spoelstra. So those seem to be particularly popular with our audience from the Philippines, which is actually a rather large chunk of our YouTube audience. Thanks to our sponsors, Biscayne Bay Brewing, the official beer of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and of the Miami Marlins, Marlins Lager, Tropical Bay IPA. They're not home tonight, but next time you go to the game, maybe on Sunday against the Lakers, check out the kiosks in the 100 and 300 levels and get the official beer again of the Marlins and of 5 Reasons Sports. Also, support local. They are a local brewery. You can get them in Winn-Dixie. You can get them in Whole Foods and Publix, all the stores in this area, as well as at our sponsor, Quarterdeck. They've got them there as well. And we're going to be having a watch party at Quarterdeck on January 31st. We'll be telling you more about that, as well as our happy hour at City Cigar Lounge, which is going to be coming up. We're also sponsored by our friend Mark Brown. You can find him at markbrownpa.com, marcbrownpa.com. He's the man with a plan. If you need an estate plan, as I felt I did, you got to go to him and sit down and get it right. Make sure that whatever it is that you have goes to the right person or the right people. He will assist you with that. He'll also help you if you got real estate that you require a closing, anything else along those lines. He's got a title company right there in-house. So small office, but they handle a lot for you. 954-566-5678, 954-566-5678. That's our friend Mark Brown at marcbrownpa.com. All right, here's who we have tonight. We've got Brady. You can follow him at BradyHawk305. We've got Ricky J. Mark. You can follow him at Ricky J. Mark. We've got Jonathan Romlicon. You can follow him at 3-Piece Combo. We have our producer, Alejandro Villegas. And we have some point, look at there he is. We have Gabe Vincent. We have Namdi. Otherwise known as Gad Cartagena, who is at State Farm Arena tonight, which, by the way, is one of the few arenas around the NBA I've never actually been to. He's having some difficulty with the Wi-Fi, so Gad is taking videos. They're on a Twitter account. I just put them on the IG account. But for now, Gabe Vincent will have his say, perhaps, or maybe not. All right, let's get to it, Brady.
He asked for 1 second, so we'll give him 1 second to set up.
Whatever it is he needs. Brady, who's in, who's out?
Yeah, still no Kyle Lowry, still no Tyler Hero for Miami. So everything looks similar just from a game-to-game sense. But the difference is from Atlanta to an Atlanta sense, things look a lot different from the last time they played Atlanta. Obviously, Omer Yurtseven was the starting center. And when you're attacking a point guard in Trae Young and trying to find ways to defend him, there's a big difference with the way you approach that compared to having Bam Adebayo, who's relatively been pretty good at stopping Trae Young with the blitzes they've thrown at him over the past few years. So I think that's just going to be the biggest difference. But no other changes there. Atlanta, I think the biggest thing is Capella is going to be back on a minutes restriction. So obviously different big men on both sides in this one.
All right, and we take a look at the line tonight. The odds makers, Vegas likes Atlanta, or at least they set the line at Atlanta by 2. It is difficult, Ricky, to beat a team 3 times in a short space of time. I don't care who they are. This was a Hawks team that last year went to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm wondering maybe if this was the real fluke season last year, as we see what's happened with a couple of the teams that were successful. A few of the teams that were successful. They're not as successful this year. Any changes? I mean, they're back in Atlanta. The last game was here. But any changes you see, and how big an impact do you think Bam has, and the whole idea of beating a team 3 times?
Well, I think, back in the day before, I think 2003, you had to beat a team 3 times in a relatively short span in order to advance to the second round of the playoffs. So I think that's something that has to happen anyways. I think this is shaping up to be a rather close sweep by the Heat, where the sweep itself doesn't necessarily speak to how competitive the games were between the teams. I think Miami is going to have to deal with Bam Adebayo still working his way into the rotation and the offense, which was able to evolve and develop all on its own, absent him for the better part of December, in which they went 14-8. I think they should be fine tonight. But I think ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, like you said, this Atlanta team did underachieve, as did quite a few overachieve, as did quite a few teams last season and are currently underachieving right now. But at the end of the day, I think we're gonna see a Heat team that is gonna continue to script with what they do. And it just, I don't know, all systems seem to point towards a competitive but defining Heat win tonight. But again, we'll have to wait and see.
We'll get to Gad here in a second as he gets set up. Jonathan, Bam is back. That's the difference here defensively. There was a 3 to 4 minute stretch there from the 7-minute mark of the fourth quarter until about 3.5 minutes left of the fourth quarter, which that's about as well as Bam can play, I think, on both ends. And I don't mean that as a pejorative in any way. That is elite top 10 player material. That is take over a game without other guys in. And again, now you can switch him out onto Trey tonight. And the Heat have already had success against Trey recently, and particularly Caleb Martin, Gabe, others kind of spearheading that. It does feel like that alters the matchup in a significant way positively for Miami tonight.
Yeah, we have a lot of guys that can, like you said, stop Trey Young. Coach Spo does a really good job of cutting the head off the snake when it comes to playing a team with like one really good star. And he's going to make Trey Young uncomfortable. And we have, like you said, 3 phenomenal defenders. You have 2 of the best, Gabe Vincent was probably one of the first guys, before Caleb Martin came in that was just a hound defensively, just absolute monster. Then Caleb Martin came in, added that as well too. And then obviously we all know about Bam Adebayo, his ability to switch on anybody, guard 1 through 5, no matter where you are on the court. It's just going to be nightmare for Trey Young. Like you said last time, we had Omer out there. They had a lot of open shots that they really weren't converting on, which would have been dangerous, given Moore another opportunity. So we can't let them have those open looks. We can't let them get into their shooting form easily. I think Bam is going to make that a lot easier for us.
And again, no Bogdanovich tonight either. So another shooter off the floor. Gad, you're at the arena there. You're taking the video of course, you had to get the Duncan Robinson video up because I know that's your fave. And it is Duncan trade season for you here. Anything that you gathered just kind of being close to the court tonight?
I apologize if the echo is really – it's really, really loud in here. But Caleb Martin looks really, really good. Duncan Robinson was very hyped up. He had a really good warm-up, and he was pretty enthused with himself. He had probably like 2 or 3 stretches where he hit 6 in a row, and he was feeling confident. Watching him and Bam warm up together, it looked pretty good. So outside of that, all the shots were falling, but you kind of expect that from a pregame, right? Like, they should be hitting those shots. But based upon the video that Alejandro posted the other day, Duncan was much better in this warm-up. So I will say, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a good game tonight. He looked confident tonight. I haven't been to many warm-ups, but seeing it in person, he looks ready to go.
Guys, that was just bad luck. I was filming and he missed those 5 or whatever.
No, but that's happened. It's happened to me too. I just didn't post them sometimes.
There was one that was worse because he missed 5 in a row, and then I put the one that he made most of them. But
What, in the fourth quarter?
You're making this worse.
I was going to say Alejandro's single-handedly tanking his trade value. Gad, I want to ask you, though, Atlanta is, I always say this, there are 3 buildings in the league, and I haven't been to State Farm, but I've been to Phillips Arena many times or whatever, but there are 3 buildings in the NBA where the Let's Go Heat chants start pretty early. Brooklyn, Washington, well, 4 if you include Orlando. Brooklyn, Washington, Orlando, and Atlanta have always felt like home games for the Heat. What are you seeing in the arena so far?
This is the earliest that I have ever seen Heat fans show up. Close to the floor, there's a lot of Hero and Butler jerseys, more so than I've seen Trey Young so far. So it looks like there could be another Heat crowd tonight. We'll see. But the fans that are here early, which is surprising, is the Heat fans. Not many Atlanta fans, but it's pretty empty right now. It's still about an hour till tip.
It is such a weird.
But
they do though in those places. It is such a weird phenomenon. On the road, Heat fans show up early. I'm telling you, I saw this consistently for years, and then they close it late. It is one of the
They're
weird.
stuck in the Bayside parking lot for 3 hours.
Well,
so.
right, precisely. paying $50. But it is. Look, this does play into it. I mean, the Heat have always felt very comfortable playing up there, particularly if they can get a lead late. Let's pivot a little bit. Before we do, I want to mention prizepicks.com. Use that code 5, F-I-V. I guess based on Gad's reporting, play Duncan Robinson over tonight. No Lowry tonight. Again, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin. But also, we didn't get to see a whole lot of Jimmy Butler the other night. And we didn't get to see a whole lot of Jimmy Butler playing with Bam. I do feel like, and our guy Jim Rodriguez was saying, play the under tonight. I think it's 219. Play the under. And my reason for playing the under, Brady, I'll go to you first on this, Brady, is that when Jimmy and Bam are in the game, the Heat tend to grind it down a little bit. It feels like they're playing 2 different styles right now.
Yeah, and even if you're looking at the second unit, no Tyler Hero, they're not even pushing pace there. Like when you're playing Gabe Vincent, or he's starting tonight, but they're going to move things around. Obviously, Caleb Martin off the bench. That is the way I'd look at things. But I think the difference is Miami won the last game against Atlanta, but I felt like they were forcing things a little bit when you watch that game. It felt like Jimmy Butler can take advantage of a Trae Young matchup, and I think we all know that. That's pretty clear. When he can post him up, that's the way they're going to go. They're going to hunt him all night. But last game they played them, he almost hunted him too much, where it almost put them in a poor spot offensively that they got away from their game. We've seen them, even as you pointed out, when they run the Gabe, Max, Caleb, Kyle Guyman, it's the ball movement superior because they just play the roles that they are given in the offense. It feels like they're forcing things through Jimmy in these type of matches when they know that they have an outlet there. So I think that's the biggest thing here. I think if they want to score, they cannot force things right there. They have to continue to move the ball around. I think they're going to need. They won that game the other night because Caleb Martin went crazy in the third quarter. They're going to need a Max Strus game. They're going to need Kyle Guy to at least play better than he did the other night. And it's just specific role players to step up offensively if they want to at least go over that 219 possibly.
Well, Ricky, question for you about Jimmy. Would you prefer that Jimmy kind of work his way into games? There you go, the Vincent Martin defense attorneys at work. Would you prefer Jimmy work his way into games or be aggressive from the jump? Or does it matter on the opponent and the circumstance? Which Jimmy do you prefer for this team right now?
I think you have to take what the defense gives you first and foremost, because whether we want to have that conversation now or later, it is what it is. I'll bring it up now, no problem. There are times when he tends to be a little bit of a ball stopper, and we don't want that to happen, especially when you consider the kind of team that you've started to see in Jimmy's absence, where there's a lot of ball movement, slashing, cutting, all these things that Spo seems to just love. You know, Spo's offenses have always appeared to be predicated on good ball movement, cutting. I mean, I'll leave the analysis to Brady because he's got his own little mini series here on the YouTube channel for that. Go ahead and check that out at your leisure, please. But the thing is, I think Jimmy needs to be more of a, dare I say it, poor man's LeBron, where he's filling the stat sheet. If the defense gives him the opportunity to take over, by all means do that. But he's got his own kind of gravity, and he needs to use that to his advantage and to the advantage of the rest of the team.
Jonathan, we talked about this 3-game set here against 3 disappointing teams. They did what was necessary the other night, although it took a little while. And we talked about which was the one that was most dangerous. I think Brady said of the 3, this was the most dangerous. It does feel like the Lakers, and Mateo Mayorga has got a new piece up on the website called Purple and Mold. It does feel like the Lakers are teetering on the edge right now. Like a coaching change may be imminent, the Westbrook situation, all of that. So again, if they can get tonight, get some momentum, they get a day off tomorrow. They always get up for LeBron. We know that. Spo always has something for him when he actually shows up, which we're expecting him to show up and play on Sunday. It does feel like this game is a little bit of a game that will tell here, because it just looks like there are a lot of games on the schedule that they can bank wins coming up.
Yeah, it's a good temperature gauge because we're also playing without Kyle and we're playing without Hero. So we can see how good are these lineups going to be without those guys, right? We can solidify units that we're going to use come playoff time. So like you said, I think this is going to be a really good, I think it's going to be a win for the team. You know, we didn't get to picks yet, but I think it's going to set the temperature and set the tone. And I think if we get this win, it's just going to help snowball even further to make that game against the Lakers more of a game that we're going to want to get that win, because, you know, obviously losing motivates you as well. But once you get on a roll and once this team starts playing really well together, Bam and Jimmy still haven't played that many games together. Right. So if they can start to get things working a little bit better, just kind of gradually improve a little bit this game, take that into next game, I think we're looking in the Heat team in a good position.
Yeah, well, we don't really have a lot of information on Kyle. I can tell you, I know everybody's asking. It's been now 3 games. I felt like he needed a little time off anyway. Brady, we've talked about that it wouldn't be the worst thing for him and maybe PJ going forward, again, depending on what Markeith's status is, which is another one of those, we have some information on that, but I don't know that that's looking like anytime soon here. But Brady, as we kind of look at tonight, and I'll let you start this as we cycle around with Gad next, what would be your biggest concern tonight?
I would probably say, as I talked about the defense earlier, you know what they're doing defensively when they have Yurtseven starting. Like, it's going to be dropped. They're going to mix in some blitzing. But I think they can get themselves in trouble if they blitz too much, because this is a guy in Trae Young who can actually make the passes when you blitz them, and they can beat you on the backside. So I think that's the big thing. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to them mixing in drop with Bam, or just going strictly switching, and you can live with PJ picking up a big in Capella, because obviously he's more of a lob threat, a roll threat anyway. So I think they do that. Obviously, Trae Young last game was the last time they played, Caleb and PJ seeing the most. So that's pretty much what I'd expect. I think Bam being back changes those numbers a little bit, but I would say just limiting down the blitzing as much as possible, especially early if they can get out to don't let Trae Young get comfortable early.
Gad, who concerns you most other than Trae tonight?
Honestly, it would be DeAndre Hunter. He's just one of those tough shot makers. So if a team is making tough shots against Miami, there's really no answer for that, because that's what the Heat do. So if he's taking the pressure off of Trae, I really think that DeAndre Hunter could give us problems. But outside of that, it's really just offensive boards for me. We've seen that be an issue sometimes with Bam. If you're going to switch Bam out, then the defense is going to be weak in the interior. So it's going to be a big PJ game in terms of boxing out, keeping Capella, keeping Okongwu off the boards, keeping Collins off the boards. I think if the Heat can execute that, not let there be a disparity in energy, match the Hawks' energy or outplay them in terms of effort, I think they should be fine. But those two facets do interest me a little bit from the Hawks' perspective.
All right, Jonathan's already said a win tonight. Brady, a win tonight? Brady, I know this is
My
one
bad,
I'm
I was
most
muted.
worried about.
No, yeah, I do think they win. I feel like the biggest thing for me is just Bam and Jimmy playing all 4 quarters, because I think, like last game, you're making a prediction, Jimmy's out late in the second. I feel like that's happened a few times here, but I think if they have these guys play and they can have Bam take over in the end like last game, but if you have both of them, if you have 2 of your 4 best players, they've been able to do it with 3, one of them before in the past when these other guys step up. But if they have those 2, I think they can close out this one.
Ricky, take us home.
I think they do win, and let me emphasize how important this win and the next few wins are going to be for this Heat team. This Heat team, despite everything that's happened this season with COVID, injuries, personal reasons, picking fights that they shouldn't, the Miami Heat are in position to finish, or not finish, but they're in position to potentially steal the 1 seed right now. And if they're able to string together a couple of wins, by the time the other guys get back on those other teams, Miami could actually be creating space the same way Manchester City is currently doing in the Premier League right now. So I think ultimately, yeah, it's very possible. These wins matter. They don't want to wish they didn't take advantage of these wins later in the season around April. This will matter.
Well, look, Chicago's without its starting backcourt now for the foreseeable future. Obviously, we got the situation with the Nets and their injuries, and obviously the half of the time absences from Kyrie. And Milwaukee can't seem to get like a complete rhythm. But tonight, Bulls, Bucks. So Miami with a win. But I know people don't like rooting for the Bucks, but Miami with a win, the Bucks with a win. Miami moves into the 1 seed, and I just haven't. I don't know that they're going to give it up. I think once they get into it, again, you look at this stretch of games that they've got, they can build a little bit of momentum there. Now, look at this. Alejandro had to throw that in there on the timeline. All right, pace and space at halftime. Okay, so check that out. Okay, Gad's at the arena. Check out his feed, Gadiel Cartagena. Obviously, I don't know if we're doing a pod tonight. I have to talk to Greg, but check out the last pod that we did. We sat down with Chris Herring on his new book, Blood in the Garden.
I agree.
He's muted. Bye, Ethan.
As your business in a cost-effective way, it's time to give podcast advertising a try. Research shows a high rate of podcast listeners made a purchase as a result of an ad they heard on a podcast.
You need to lose weight, they can help you do it. They can help you lose 10 to 15 pounds in just 10 days with the Intense Cleanse and Detox. They've got specific stacks for you, whether you're an aging man, a budding athlete, or you just want to fight cold and flu season. And they can help you with your pre- and post-workout regimens, okay? Everything in the store and Intense Nutrition, other than the protein, 20% off if you mention 5 reasons. That's 20% off if you mention 5 reasons for anything in the store. Superior quality, superior service. Check them out on Facebook and on Instagram with the handle Intense Nutrition. Pretty simple. Or just give them a call, 954-775-0257. That's 954-775-0257. They're in Coral Springs over on University Drive. Again, one more time, 954-775-0257. Intense Nutrition. And now, today's episode.
Yeah, 5 on the floor, Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Here's today's floor plan. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. I've got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. And I have someone who I've known for a long time. He's been a long-time NBA writer. He's now written a book called Blood in the Garden, which is about the Knicks in the 1990s. And it was a book that I had particular interest in because I was going to grad school at Columbia in 1995. So I was around those teams in New York. I don't readily admit this, but most of my family are Knicks fans. And I will go to it, Greg. I had a John Starks jersey. It's the only jersey that I've ever owned. So I've acknowledged all this stuff before we start. And of course, those were the Pat Riley years in New York. And Chris has written this great book, which I'm waiting to get my hands on. My brother's already started it, so he's already halfway through it. Chris, appreciate you joining us today.
Could not be more appreciative of you guys having me on. Thank you.
Well, let's get to it. And you know, there was an excerpt that's already been published in the New York Times, so credit to you for that. And it covers Pat Riley's decision to leave the New York Knicks. And I think I'm framing it that way because in reading the excerpt, it seems like something that he kind of set up, like you sort of put it in the way you introduced the excerpt, kind of the behind the scenes machinations to leave the Knicks. Can you go through that process for people? Because obviously if that doesn't happen, the last quarter century of elite basketball in Miami changing from a football town to a basketball town, 6 finals appearances, 3 championships, and now another contending team do not happen. So tell us a little bit about the backstory there.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you giving me the platform to do it. He'd been wildly successful in New York. The only thing he was missing was the championship ring. He won 4 of them with the Lakers, and he had the Knicks on the cusp of doing it the year before all this happened with Miami, when he got the Knicks to the finals. So, stuff was starting to break down. He had a 5-year deal with the Knicks. He was going into year 4. The Knicks obviously want to sign him to an extension. And at that point, Pat, whether you believe this or not, he claims to the Knicks that he wants essentially a piece of ownership there. I imagine part of it because, one, if anybody's worth it at that point, I guess maybe Phil Jackson is starting to enter that conversation. But Pat Riley, even by then, had won more championships than Phil Jackson had when you look at his Lakers tenure. So there's that part of it. But also the Knicks have had 3 different ownership structures in 3 years that Pat Riley has been there. And so he's saying, each time this happens, I don't really know what I'm stepping into. And the Knicks kind of wrote that off as like, you're being paranoid for no reason. Maybe fair, but at the same time, look at the ownership the Knicks stepped into shortly after Pat left. So maybe it wasn't really unfair from that standpoint. But anyway, the Knicks essentially suggested that they weren't willing to entertain that. They really couldn't in the way that a team like Miami was going to be able to with Mickey Harrison, because the Knicks were corporately owned. They can't just give away 10% of their team because you've got a lot of shareholders that you're beholden to. So anyway, he's the highest paid coach in the league already. They were willing to double his salary to make it $3 million instead of 1.5. They were willing to give him the team president role of basketball operations. But the team is struggling. They have a lot of infighting going on that season. And during New Year's Eve, when, they had gone into Christmas, they were 12-12 at the Christmas break in the NBA that season. It was a pretty bad record by the Knicks standard by that point. Pat goes to Aspen, Colorado, and he meets up with a friend who has people over named Dick Butera, who is a wealthy real estate developer who's still there in that area. And he says, I'm having a rough time with the Knicks. Like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And at the same time, he says that Dick Butera kind of announces at this get together. It's funny you would say that because me and my friends are thinking about buying the Miami Heat, who were up for sale. And of course, Pat has interest in that. And he says, if you're able to do that, you could probably have me as a coach. I think I'm ready to make the move at this point, even though, keep in mind, he's under contract for another year after this with the Knicks. So he's hoping that his friend will get the team. His friend ends up not getting the team. At the end of January, Mickey Arison wins the bidding war basically to get it. But the conversation doesn't end there. Mickey Arison gets the team, and then Dick Butera, for some reason, contacts Mickey Arison. There are phone records that show that. He claims that they were not talking about Pat Riley during that time, but okay, whatever you want to believe. Come February, right after the All-Star break, the Knicks have a game in Miami. And seemingly, if you put two and two together, it wouldn't be that crazy of a thought that Dick Butera had basically told Mickey Arison, why don't you try to meet Pat when he comes down there with his team? So Mickey Arison goes to a shoot-around that the Knicks have, or wants to go to a shoot-around. He asks the Knicks PR person, can I watch the Knicks practice? Can you ask Pat if I can watch practice? Pat, you guys know Pat. Pat says no, very much in or out sort of person. He doesn't even let his own scouts from the Knicks watch practice without prior permission. So of course he's not going to let the opposing owner watch, a shoot around on the road, no less. So anyway, he says no. Mickey Arison waits in the tunnel of Miami Arena. So when the Knicks come out and are going to the bus, he pulls aside Pat and says, can we talk for just a minute? And Pat thinks about it, but eventually he gives in and says yes, which is kind of stunning given what we know about Pat Riley, especially if you read the book about how this is a guy that was going to find his players if they knock someone down from the other team and then help to pick them back up. He was very much in or out, so that goes completely against his MO. Anyway, fast forward to the way that season ends for the Knicks, which a lot of people remember in New York. Patrick Ewing has just a brutal finger roll that just kind of bounces off the back rim in a Game 7. They lose to the Pacers in 7. As Pat Riley walks off the court, Marv Albert makes a point to kind of mention that Pat Riley's walking off, and it's going to create all these questions about whether Pat Riley wants to come back, whether he's going to resign to stay with the Knicks, whether he's going to go somewhere else. And if you watch that segment, that sequence on YouTube, you go back and watch it now, Pat Riley turns around as he's walking in the tunnel, and he turns and takes like one long last look at Madison Square Garden, the floor. And you get the impression right then and there that he's made a decision that he's done. So even if you don't believe that, then Dick Butera gets a call from Pat less than an hour after the game ends. And Pat calls him and he says to Dick, I'm done. I'm done here in New York. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm finished. I can't stand it. And Dick Butera can hear all this noise in the background. He's like, where are you? Where are you calling from? And obviously, he knows that the game just ended. So, not only is he calling right after a game, within the first hour after the game, he can hear all this noise in the background. He said, I'm calling you from the team bus. And it's like, you're on the team bus and you're within earshot of people and you're telling me this. So it tells you a little bit about the mindset of just how done Pat actually was. And he basically told Dick Butera, if you've still got that buddy in Miami, set this thing up because I'm out of here. And so that, that is something that I'm not sure how out there that was. I don't think it's really been out there to that extent, but he was ready. And they, they basically started working on a deal right from that point. Dick Butera was negotiating with Mickey Arison, asked for some pretty steep demands. Obviously, ownership was a big part of it. But to my knowledge, Pat is still the only person in management, coach, I guess is probably the more correct way to put it, who's had an ownership stake in a team, and not just an ownership stake, but a substantial one. And, I think that probably better explains how he went about leaving. It was not done by the book, certainly, because he was still under contract when those conversations started. But it's been pretty good trade-off if you're the Miami Heat. I don't think there's any question about that.
I want to let Greg jump in here, but I do have one quick question for you because I just want to,
Sure.
I should have asked this at the top. Did Pat speak to you for the book?
He did not speak to me for the book. I gave him, I went to his hometown for 3 or 4 days where he grew up, in Schenectady, New York. Spent a lot of time with childhood folks, went to different parts of the country, spent time with other folks that have been friends with him through adulthood. But I did request to talk to him. And then even when he said no, and when the Heat organization said no, I did send a list of questions and kind of give him a blow-by-blow of what would be in the book and give him an opportunity to respond to that. He chose not to do that.
Did anyone from the Heat?
No.
Okay.
And same thing with that, though, with Mickey Arison and stuff like that, where I did put along questions at least, but were declined.
Okay.
some people, but not people that would have had anything to do with the decision like that. Folks that were, players, former players. I think John Crotty, I think he does stuff with the radio, but nobody that would have had a factor in a decision like that.
So Chris, in full disclosure, I could listen to you talk about this Pat Riley stuff. Like we could go on for hours and hours. This stuff fascinates me. That is stuff that, as somebody who has followed Riley's career, particularly as he got to Miami, I had never heard any of that stuff before. It's super fascinating to me. And I kind of really, my experience with Pat Riley particularly has been in Miami, right? So it's interesting from this perspective, and I'm going to switch right to those Heat Knicks series because I haven't had the opportunity again, in honesty, to read your book yet. I have seen the excerpts that have been out and I can't wait to read it. It's absolutely appointment reading for me, but the Knicks kind of regrouped when Riley left. And then there was this rivalry and I remember Riley's first game back in Madison Square Garden and all of those series. I mean, I was like the kid who in one of those Heat specials, they caught video of me holding up a sign that said, "This means war" at one of the Heat Knicks playoff games, which in retrospect is ridiculous. But so I was so entrenched in that era, and I'm interested to pick your brain on what you found out about how that Knicks team felt about those Riley Miami Heat teams and just like dissecting that entire era of Heat basketball.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny. I talked to Jackie McMullen for the book. I just thought it would be good to get the perspective of folks that were national reporters at the time and local ones for that matter. But I thought Jackie would be fascinating just because, I mean, she's a Hall of Fame writer who covered one of the most fiery rivalries in the league, in league history, with the Celtics and the Lakers. And I kind of asked her, like, what do you think of the Knicks Heat rivalry? Like, obviously it's not Celtics Lakers, but I'm just curious, what did you think of it during the 90s? She's like, that one didn't even register for me when I think about the big rivalries throughout the league's history. And it's interesting because it wasn't consequential from the standpoint of titles, but I don't know that you had teams that hated each other more than those two did in the late 90s, let alone just the nature of the series that for 4 straight years, they went the distance all 4 of those years. And every one of those series was really tight. And a couple of them were kind of, the outcome might have shifted because of suspensions, the first 2. So you don't have many that you can compare and look at that, let alone, the backstory of it with Riley and the Van Gundys on either sideline and the fact that the teams were built similarly, the fact that the Knicks almost out of spite tried to trade for Alonzo Mourning so that Miami wouldn't get him. And, and the Knicks basically owning the fact that they were trying to do it out of spite so that Pat wouldn't get him. They would have paired Patrick and Alonzo Mourning together. So, this was a real hatred that these teams had. And to your point about that game in 95, Riley's first game back in New York, they went around and were asking Michael Kay, the radio host in New York, was I guess kind of a sideline reporter at the time. And so they had him doing feature reporting around the arena, I think one game before Riley's return, just taking the pulse of the fans and the crowd. Like, what did they think of Riley? And was Riley a hero? Was Riley a villain? And he stuck a microphone in front of like a 6-year-old kid's face. He's like, "I think Pat should go to jail." It was a wild time. It sounds like you would have just been on the other side of that, but it sounded like you were just as passionate. So it was a wild time. There are a lot of details I had on that rivalry, including one. Knicks fans are still frustrated, angry, convinced that, the fix was in 97 when the Knicks had a 3-1 lead. PJ Brown essentially flips over Charlie Ward, who'd kind of gone into his legs during a box out. And
not kinda.
He did. There's no question whether it was intentional, but either way, it happened that way. I think we could also say that PJ Brown's reaction was maybe a little bit intense, given that there's a 9-inch height difference. But what I thought was interesting, I wanted to try to get one layer deeper than just what we know about all these things, at least for every key story in the Knicks history. And Isaac Austin, who I think was maybe 6th man of the year one year, with the Heat and, as a key reserve for those teams. He told me, and it's always interesting because people have always kind of hinted and suggested that maybe Riley had said something to the players to really get them on edge because they were down 3-1 in the series, because they needed to do something to shift the tide in the series. They're being outplayed in the series. And no one's ever said like exactly what it is, or if there even was anything that he actually said. And Ike Austin basically said, no, there was something said that day in shoot around. I was there when it happened. And Riley kept using the word fight. He was like, you guys are just lying down. You got to get up and you got to fight and blah, 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 blah. And you got to fight. And he kept using the phrasing. And as he said it, Ike remembered looking at PJ Brown, and he said PJ said something to the effect of like, I swear if a motherfucker touches me, or something like that. And so it's easy enough to see how one influences the other. And it's also easy enough to think that like Pat's messaging was real. And the Knicks operated the same way, where Pat would show them videos before certain games. He would call them soft one game, and then the next game going into it, wouldn't even speak to them in pregame meetings in the locker room, would show them videos of Rams headbutting each other and violent car crashes. It's messaging. And Pat has been a master of messaging. So it's easy enough to see how that actually could have influenced what happened with PJ Brown and Charlie Ward, which, by the way, the other detail in the book, PJ Brown and Charlie Ward were in chapel together before that game. I mean, they were also like among the most religious players in the league, and, you know, like brothers in Christ. So they're friends now. I think they were kind of friends before that. They were together like a couple hours before all that happened. And so PJ was worked up, you know, maybe it came from somewhere. I suggested that it did come from somewhere. It came from Pat. So that's in the book as well.
Yeah, PJ was, in my 25 years of covering the Heat, the nicest player that I ever covered. I mean, that was the craziest part of all of that. The very fact that PJ would even curse is sort of beyond the pale, because it's just not even the PJ that I knew. But those series, like you mentioned, I mean, there were like 12 rivalries within the rivalry. There was the acquisition of Sprewell, who Hardaway didn't like. There was LJ and Zoe, which, you know, there was a history there going back to Charlotte. There was all of these different things. And you mentioned, obviously, the Van Gundys, and then there's all the other moments, whether it's the Allen Houston shot, which I think for Heat fans may still be the most painful memory, those who have actually been with the team since the beginning, or Jamal Mashburn being defined, his entire Heat career being defined by one shot that he didn't take, or even the Nick Bavetta stuff from Tim Hardaway, which was sort of my fault and Mike Wise's fault for putting that in his head before that game, where Tim came out afterwards with his Nick Bavetta rant. I don't know, Chris, that we'll ever see a rivalry like that again. And it does show a little bit, because I have a great respect for Jackie, but sort of the myopic nature of the national media, that if it's not Celtics or Lakers, they really don't care a lot of the time. And that Knicks Heat thing, like you said, nobody won a championship, but we've never had a series of series where all of them ended on the last game and there were all those rivalries. I want to pivot to one other thing with you here, because history repeats itself with Pat. And I think, I know you went to Schenectady, and everybody has said he's more Schenectady Pat than Showtime Pat, right? Like, what happened with the Lakers was one thing, but the Knicks and the Heat stuff is a little bit more paired together into what his personality really is. And I'm what I'm anxious to read about in the book, because it plays into what's going on with the Heat now, is the way that he found certain guys and empowered certain guys. I mean, Mason and Starks in particular being two players that nobody wanted. I mean, Starks was bagging groceries. Nobody knew what kind of position Anthony Mason would play, if he was even a basketball player or a boxer. Do you see that similarity now in the Heat are winning with undrafted players all over the roster, with Jimmy Butler as their lead guy right now, who has a personality that would seem that he would fit on those 90s Knicks. Do you see sort of history repeating itself with some of that stuff?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the Heat culture thing is real. I mean, people joke about it. People laugh about it. It's you read enough details from this book, and you guys have been around the Heat long enough. You know that, sometimes I think maybe some things are embellished. By the way, as we talk about embellishments, I don't remember whether PJ swore. I'm almost positive when I quote him in the book, he didn't. So you're probably right about that. I don't want to put those words in his mouth, particularly for how religious he is. But no, I mean, Pat was, again, with the messaging, with everything else, with the conditioning, that still seems like that holds up for them. The Knicks were the same way. It was actually kind of funny, because as I was talking to Ike and other people from the organization from those years, so much of the stuff was the same. Pat taking the Knicks on a trip to Reno for 36 hours to gamble. I'm almost positive the Heat did that at some point. The idea of Pat taking his players to a movie as a surprise for a day. I'm almost positive Pat did that with the Heat. So it was the same sort of thing. He literally just kind of took it and transplanted it to Miami. And the idea that he takes some underdogs and then he takes some guys that maybe don't have, that are a little bit rough around the edges. That's kind of what he does, because Pat really was a guy that his first practice in the pros, his coach looked at him and said, like, you're the worst looking player I've ever had. Like, no, I've never had a draft pick look like this. And, why are you looking like this? And Pat's like, well, I've never played guard before. And he's like, well, you better learn how to do it. Basically, he was undersized to be in the NBA. He was not athletic enough to be in the NBA. He'd always been the most athletic guy and one of the biggest guys on his team. He got drafted into the NFL. He just didn't play there. But when he got to the NBA, he just had to really rough it to kind of make it and just beat up on Jerry West to earn his keep. So I think he's always had an affinity for guys like that and having guys like that on his roster, because he really wasn't like an NBA blue chipper himself. And so I think he kind of thrived on having a bunch of guys that weren't, because he knew how to work with them and knew how to get the best out of them.
All right, that's part of that podcast that you guys can find here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining us for this pregame show. Remember, during halftime, as soon as the second quarter is over, go over to Twitter and join us for the halftime show with our friends Sean, Tony, and Marco Romo, who are going to be hosting that halftime show. And then right after the game, the post-up show with 5 Reasons here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, hosted by our friend, well, we'll see who's tonight, but hopefully he's hosted by our friend Royal. Starting 5 tonight for the Miami Heat: Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, and Gabe Vincent. Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, and Gabe Vincent. That's the starting 5 for the Miami Heat tonight. Have a good night. Enjoy the game. Remember, Gat Cartagena is over there at State Farm Arena, so you guys can follow him on Twitter at Gat Cartagena, and he's going to be reporting from there in Atlanta. The Miami Heat trying to stay in the first place of the Eastern Conference tonight over there facing the Atlanta Hawks. Have a good night. Enjoy the game, and we will see you later here tonight.